I was the Saturday night banquet speaker at that convention. And I asked that question. There weren't too many people there that I knew. But anyway, I brought that out in my presentation that night. Who is the most dangerous, the liar or the believer? Afterwards, there was a gentleman came up and introduced himself. He said, I'm a political science professor, some college or university up in Michigan. He said, I have been teaching the students the political science that he had learned during his PhD, of course. And he said that has to be one of the most important questions that I have ever heard that needs to be asked. Now, I'm presenting it to you. Who's the most dangerous, the liar or the believer? It doesn't take most people very long to analyze that and recognize that if you've got 100 million people who believe King George III's clone, the guy we know of as King George IV, if there's 100 million people that believe the lies about Iran, about Iraq, about the terrorism, the war on terrorism, if you've got 100 million people that believe those lies, those 100 million people are dangerous, are they not? I call him King George IV. He's a clone of King George III. And here we are. We're to be celebrating the 4th of July, the passing or the creation of the Declaration of Independence. What a tremendous document that document was and is to this day. We have such a tendency to think of the 4th of July as another holiday, another day to celebrate, shoot some fireworks off and that type of thing. We don't stop and think about the fact that it is we the people who put that document together. We the people is as much a proper term today as it was back there in July of 1776. We the people. We're the ones responsible. And I'm going to read just a portion of the Declaration of Independence here. This is very familiar to all of us, I'm sure, but sometimes we have to go back and kind of analyze things. I'm not reading the first paragraph. I'm starting with the second. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, governments are instituted among men, deriving their just powers from the consent of the governed. Remember, I was talking about control. Where does George Bush, the neocons, where do the politicians in Washington get their power? They get their power from the programmed, mentally programmed people of this country. That's where they get their power. We the people have tolerated this massive amount of propaganda and lies that has been we've been bombarded with it. How do we give our power? How do How do we transfer our power to them? They're using my power, they're using your power. Back in 1976, I decided that I had to find out where the Internal Revenue Service got its power. Where did they get this power to terrorize the productive people of this nation? Where did it come from? How was this power transmitted from we the people to the Justice Department prosecuting these people for income tax evasion? The judge sitting on the bench in his black dress. Michael was a little more proper with him. I call it a black dress. Anyway, I went and I sat in, I became a court watcher. I sat in on some IRS prosecutions, and it didn't take me long to recognize that it was not the law. It was not the law. It was not that law which was causing these people to be convicted. The power came from the 12 people sitting on that jury, and they followed the instructions of the federal judge, and they followed them to the letter. I once watched them prosecute 5 defendants in 5 days, and every single one of them, the juries came out within like 30 minutes or so and said guilty. The consent of the governed. They were able to get the consent of the governed because of those programmed minds sitting on that jury, not realizing that they had more power than the judge, not realizing that they were Americans, that they were endowed with their Creator with certain rights, and that the Constitution and the Bill of Rights was put there to secure those rights. They didn't know that. I'll never forget it. I was able to talk to one of the foremen from one of those juries. He was a CPA. He was an educated man. He was probably 50 years of age. I was able to talk to him in private. And I told him about the power of a jury and what they were supposed to be doing. When I told that gentleman what he had done, he had tears in his eyes. Now, it was the same effect as the fellow, the father that dashes out of his house. He's going to be late for work. He dashes out of the house and jumps in his car, and he backs up and backs over his 2-year-old son. What is the first thing he says? I didn't know he was there. I didn't know. That's what that CPA told me that day. He says, I didn't know. Are you beginning to understand what your responsibility is? Your responsibility is to see to it that your friends, your neighbors, your family have knowledge instead of propaganda stored up here in their computer, in their mental computers. It's your job. I took that job on back there. I was a working man. I had a business. But I recognized that I had a responsibility to communicate with you people right here today and pass this information on to you so that you know, and so that you can pass this on to others, so that you can get yourself deprogrammed, so that you can become an effective person.